I'm going to just share just a couple quick stats. I don't want to go too into the weeds.
Definitely the rates is a key factor for buyers and sellers.
Yeah, right? And sellers, because it affects both of them, right? We concluded this past week is that inventory has gone up dramatically.
And the other thing that it affects is that some sellers, they're not wanting to sell because they have a really good rate.
Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be focusing on what's happening in the market today. We're in May already, May 2025, wow. Right? Wow. This year's flying by.
Right.
And the real estate market, it's kind of all over the place, right? Would you say?
It is, yeah.
And so I wanted to, just put together a quick video and let the people, the people that follow us, people in our database know kind of what's happening in the real estate market here, in the Santa Clara County and throughout the Bay Area. Because if you're thinking of buying or selling, I think you really need to know what's going on.
So what the landscape looks like.
What the landscape looks like, right? So you can make the best decision possible. And there are some opportunities right now that I'm seeing, right? So this past week, we have a sales meeting every week and we pull up stats. And I'm going to just share just a couple quick stats. I don't want to go too into the weeds, but I pulled up Santa Clara County and I broke it down by single family home, and then townhouse and condo, right? How many homes are active and how many homes are currently pending. So single family homes right now, as of last week in Santa Clara County, there's a little over 1,400 available, right? But a few months back, right, there was like less than half of that, right? 1,400 available and there's currently about 600, almost 650 pending. And then in the townhouse condo side of it, there's a little over 900 available and there's only about 300 that are pending. And so what we concluded this past week is that inventory has gone up dramatically.
Which is kind of expected during this time, right? I mean, during this time of year, definitely inventory does go up. But I don't think it's the thing for me is it's sitting a little longer.
It's sitting longer. And the other thing that's different now is even though inventory tends to go up in the spring and summertime, more people come out to sell. But what we have on the external factors is that the interest rates have kind of been up and down. And then you have all this stuff in the news with the tariffs and the stock market took a big hit. And so we kind of have that battle on the side, right?
Absolutely,
And so I guess, what does that mean for the people buying? What does that mean for the people selling? And maybe even what are you seeing when you're talking to people right now?
I mean, just to kind of align with this right now, I was running some rates, giving some quotes. And so, just to give you an idea of what the rates look like right now. On $1 million purchase, 20% down, 0 points, you're looking at about 6.5, 6.375. If you're looking to pay a point to buy down the interest rate, you're looking at 1 point would get the rate down to about 6%. Right. So that gives you an idea where the rates are at. And like you mentioned, I mean, the rates have definitely fluctuated, but there's still some there's still some really good rates. I mean, a lot of times people are looking back, a few years ago, we're getting rates in the 2s or the 3s. I mean, those days are kind of gone. But, we're kind of settling in where the rates are, maybe in the high 5s or high 6s, right? That's kind of where they've been floating around, right? So, definitely the rates is a key factor for buyers and sellers.
And sellers, because it affects both of them, right?
Absolutely.
If the rates, are up and down, well, then that's going to affect, if you're a seller, that's going to affect the amount of buyers that, and their buying power, how much they can offer on your home, right?
And the other thing that it affects is that some sellers, they're not wanting to sell because they have a really good rate, right? They're sitting on a 3% or 4% interest rate. So they sell, but when they go purchase, their rate's going to be higher, and obviously their property tax is going to be higher if they upgrade it. Right. So that's another factor to kind of consider.
Now, how are the tariff situation, and more so the stock market, right? Because the tariff stuff that we're seeing in the news affected the stock market drastically, right? Where a lot of people's money, especially around here in the Bay Area, is tied to stocks, right? Like their down payment, they're getting it from their stocks, from their RSUs, and from their tech companies and stuff like that. Are you seeing that affect some people, or what are you hearing even in the team?
So what I'm hearing is, some of the buyers are holding off because they don't want to liquidate their stocks because it has came down, right? So we are seeing that some buyers are like, they're really active looking to purchase. Now they're kind of like putting it on hold. So we're definitely seeing that. And one thing that I'm telling some of these buyers is that you don't need to leverage. You don't need to put 20 or 25% down to purchase. This may be an opportunity for you to use a minimum down payment program. So maybe you have some cash saved and you just use that. Maybe put 3 or 5% down and leave your stocks where they're at and wait for them to come up. And then later you can refinance. Once the stocks come up, you can pull that money out and you can buy down or pay down your principal balance.
That's actually a really smart strategy, right? Because you only lose money on stocks when you liquidate it, right?
Yeah.
If your stocks dropped and like, let's say I was going to pull 20% out, but now I'm only going to pull out 5%.
There you go.
Well, I'm not taking the hit on that other 15% that I would have taken a hit for, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you still get access to the property.
Yes.
Get your foot in the door, start building some equity.
Yes.
And then later on, you can access the rest of the stocks once it
you
goes
definitely
up.
have another asset that's going to potentially be growing.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, that's actually a really good way to put it. And I think what that just kind of solidifies is that right now people are starting to get creative to make deals happen.
Absolutely.
Right? They're thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Like you just said, right?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too, like we're looking at the inventory, there's opportunities for buyers to go ahead and negotiate with sellers to go ahead and get a credit to either buy down the interest rate or to go ahead and cover some of their closing costs so it's less money that the buyer has to bring in.
Yeah. Right? And I think the other thing to also point out is that because there's more inventory, what we're noticing now is buyers are getting more selective now.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas like in any given neighborhood, there's maybe 1 or 2 homes for sale, and now there's 5 homes for sale.
Yeah, they have options.
They have options, right? So now it's like, now they're going in and like, whoa, I don't like that house. I don't like the kitchen.
Yeah.
Where before, that was the only one they could choose from. So it was like, all right, let's just bite the bullet. Even though it doesn't have the kitchen I like, I'll fix it later.
Yeah, we can remodel it.
We can remodel it. But now that people are kind of thinking twice, and even one of our agents said in our meeting, is like, yeah, my buyer wants to go look at 20 different houses now.
Yeah, right?
Because there's 20 to choose from now in his price range, where before there was only just a few, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think no, and again, I think if you're an agent, you really have to dial down with your client what their must-haves are.
Yeah.
Right, and that's something that we kind of teach and preach with our agents is really get familiar with what your buyers are looking for, so that when you do identify that you can help them move along, right? Move them forward.
And I think it's good, as if I'm a buyer, I think it's good that there is more options to choose from. But then I also think that can work against me, right? Because if you go look at too many houses,
you kind of start looking the same.
They start looking the same, right? You start forgetting which one was what.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you can pass up an opportunity because you were too busy looking at everything else, right? And Shri on our team told us a story, right, where his buyer, put an offer on a home, they got counter offered. The seller really needed to sell. But at that point, the buyer didn't necessarily think it was a good deal.
Yeah.
Then they started looking at other homes. They passed up that counter offer, started looking at other homes. The prices were higher.
Yes.
And then they wanted to come back to this original one, and by that time it wasn't available.
It wasn't available.
Right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes when you get that good deal in your hand, like, you got to just jump on it. If it checks off most of the boxes, and you're going to be there a long time, locking into your home equity from now, it's better for you because it's just going to keep growing over time.
No, right? I agree. It's definitely important, and that's why I think it's as a buyer, be very clear on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And if you identify it, be ready to act.
Yeah.
Be ready to act. Right.
And one thing I remember we were coaching the agents on this week is when you have husband and wife, sometimes they're not on the same page with what they want to buy. Right. Wife wants the fully remodeled. Husband's like, I don't mind fixing up the the kitchen or whatever that might be. And I think that also can, there's missed opportunity there, right?
Yeah.
Because if you spend so much time looking at too many homes and you're passing up good deals because you're not on the same page, that can backfire against you.
And again, it's just important to make sure that communication's there, right?
Yeah.
And I think as an agent, or if you're going to be looking for an agent, you may need that agent to be in the middle, kind of mediate that, to bring the husband and wife together, so that they understand what and get clear with what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right.
And really put it on paper, right? And like that's something that we do with our clients. That's something that I practice and I preach to our team, is sit down with both of them.
Yeah.
Put on a paper, put a line down the middle and say, husband, what are your must-haves? Wife, what are your must-haves?
Yeah.
And then let's see which ones match up.
Yeah.
And circle the 5 that all match up, right?
Yeah.
And if you can find the property that checks off all 5 and it matches up on both sides and you're getting a good deal, you should probably jump on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, instead of stressing yourself out.
Because if you have too many options, you get confused, right?
Yeah.
It's confusing, and then you get you don't make a decision, and then you miss out. Like you said, you can miss out on some opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another quick stat, right? I want to switch it over, from the perspective of sellers, right? If you're someone looking to sell your home. Another quick stat that I pulled up, Santa Clara County, within the last 2 weeks, there's been 323 properties that lowered their price.
Wow. Okay.
Right? That's a big number,
Yeah.
right? In the last 2 weeks, 805 new properties that came on the market.
Okay.
Both single family, townhouse, and condo, but also over 300 that dropped their price,
Wow.
right? Pending and contingent, there was, a little over 500, right? Just in the last 2 weeks. And sold, there was about, a little under 500, right? And so what that's telling me is properties are sitting on the market a little bit longer. Yeah. There's a little more supply, right, than there is demand. It's still a seller's market overall, right?
Yeah, definitely a seller's
There's
market.
only, maybe a couple months worth of inventory, right?
Yeah.
But sellers are decreasing their price, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before in other markets, like, other times.
You're outbidding, right?
Every time it's a bidding war, right?
Yeah.
Now people are decreasing their price. So if you're a seller, my advice to you is a couple things. Number one is we got to reset the price expectations, right?
Yeah.
So if you were thinking you're going to get this peak price that maybe was available a year or two ago, or even 6 months ago, that may not be the case right now, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm sitting down with a seller, I'm not only looking at the sold comparables, right? Mm-hmm. I'm actually looking what's on the market today that's
Absolutely.
a comparable and what's pending right now.
Yeah.
What actually is in contract.
And the great exercise, right? The great exercise for that is if you're a listing agent and you're going out there meeting with the potential seller, is that you got to do your homework, right?
Yeah.
Your listing agent, your potential listing agent has to do their homework. And one thing they need to be doing is they need to be contacting the listing that's pending, right?
Yeah.
Whoever the listing agent is, they need to contact them and find out the activity, find out what's going on and the feedback on that particular property that's very similar to the one you put, that you're going to be listing.
Yeah.
Right?
How many offers did they get?
Absolutely.
How much over the asking price? See how long it's been on the market, right? Because that's the real data. That's today's data, right?
Yeah.
The home that sold a month or two ago, it's sometimes it's no longer relevant because it sold a month or two ago, but it was actually listed probably a month or 45 days before that, right? And
so
the
market, 60 day, that's a 60-day delay, right?
60-day delay, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that our market, depending on what's going on in the economy, as we see, it can change.
Oh yeah.
Within a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, just like going back to what we were talking about the buyers, you may have a buyer that's very motivated right now, but with what's going on with the stocks, they may pull back, right? And that just creates that supply and demand.
Absolutely. So it goes back to what I was saying is we need to really be clear on our expectations, right? Whoever you choose to work with, if you're selling your home, make sure they're not just giving you best case scenario.
Yeah.
You need to be looking at worst case scenario. If there's a price range in your neighborhood, say it's a $100,000 swing, I would be looking on the lower end, right? Even if my house is a little bit nicer than that comp, and I would say, okay, if my home's sold on the lower end, can I still make this sale happen?
Yeah. Does it still make sense?
Does it still make sense?
Is it going to take me to the next step?
Exactly.
My next purchase or my next move, right?
Am I going to net enough money to move on from this property?
And I think, just talking with some of our listing agents here in the office, we teach that, right? Give that range.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes if you're a seller, you're looking at the agent to tell you that, hey, it's going to sell for this amount.
Yeah.
But I think you got to really lean into the data and really understand that range. And like you said, making sure that if it went on the lower end, is that still going to take me to the next step in my life for the next move or the next purchase?
Yeah, exactly. Because I would hate for a seller to put their home on the market thinking best case scenario, and then it ends up selling on the lower end, and now they don't want to move forward, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of time and energy is wasted.
Yeah.
The stress of putting your home on the market, all that stuff.
Showing it, all that good stuff.
Showing it, staging it, whatever you're doing. It's a lot of work, right? Only to end up canceling or changing your mind or something, right? Yeah. And so err on the side of being more conservative in your expectations.
And hoping for the best, right? I mean, obviously, we're going to push for the best for the seller, but again, if just making sure that on that lower end, if you can still make it happen.
Yeah, and like what we said earlier is that because there is more inventory on the market, that means your pricing strategy, you need to look at what else is available now, right?
What can that buyer get
Yeah.
for that same dollar
If
amount?
my home's going for, $1 million range, let's say, well, what else is available for $1 million, right? Because that same buyer who's looking at your house is going to look at the home down the street.
Yeah.
It's going to look at the home in the neighborhood that's next to yours,
Yeah.
or in a comparable neighborhood with comparable schools, right, and amenities. And so it's not just looking at what's available in your current neighborhood. What else can I buy with that same dollar?
Yeah.
Can I go down the street and buy a nicer home or a bigger home
Yeah.
with what you're thinking yours is going to sell for, right? So that's important. The other thing too is that since buyers are more selective now, that means now is the time when you gotta take the extra steps to really prep your home for sale.
Yeah, I think, and the prep, and then also the way you market it, right? So whoever you hire as your listing agent needs to be marketing that property. And I think it's we've talked about it before. The two things that control it's going to be the marketing and the pricing.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point you want to make sure your house stands out.
Yeah.
From any other property that's being listed.
Yeah. And to kind of touch on marketing, when we say marketing, that's a few different things in my opinion,
Yeah.
right? That's how does the home look, right? When someone walks in, right? How does it also look online, right? Like, are the photos nice? Is it staged, right? Is it on all the websites? Are there as many eyeballs as possible seeing it online, because that's where everyone's shopping? But then also, what happens when I come to the house, right?
How does it look? Yeah.
Does it look the same as the photos, right?
Yeah.
Are you maintaining the same level that you did for the photos as when we show the property?
Because it's an experience for that buyer,
It's an experience, right? Especially if you're living in the property.
Yeah.
That's where you got to be extra careful. If the property's vacant and staged, well, then it's going to kind of remain at the same level, right?
Yeah.
But when you're like, I got it all ready for the photos and we're living here,
Yeah.
and then now I got to show it, but my kids made a mess.
Yeah.
That can bite you in the butt too, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's definitely, it is challenging, and you got to make sure that the property's, set for people to view.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're a buyer's agent, you want to make sure that you also preview the property, right? And if you're a listing agent, you want to make sure you prep your seller.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's more than just prepping in the beginning. It's the ongoing
communication.
but it's the ongoing keeping it prepped while it's on the market, especially for homes that are being lived in, right? Because on the first week, maybe everything's nice and tidy, but then now it's been on the market for 2 or 3 weeks, right? We've experienced this where, hey, you haven't cut the grass.
Yeah.
Or you let the pool get green, right?
Yeah.
Or you stopped, whatever, right?
Or even some of the staging when they use, I don't know, they use those blow-up beds, right? It's like deflated.
Yeah, it's deflated, right? Because it got hot outside, and the blow-up bed is now deflated.
So
So it looks different from day 1 versus day 21, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reality right now. When I'm meeting with the seller, or we're meeting with the seller that's going to live in the property, I'm like, hey, it's not just prepping it now. We got to keep this thing show ready until we're in contract.
We got to be able to perform throughout the whole process.
Yeah, and right? I think that's something that people don't talk about right there.
Yeah, because everyone's excited in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's excited for the first week, but you have to understand, now that they're sitting on the market, we got to keep that same excitement through the next, next few weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it might, instead of taking you a week to get in contract, it might take you 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so when that person comes on the 3rd week, that may be your buyer, we don't want to scare them off because you let the grass go, right?
Yeah.
Or you stop taking care of the pool or anything like that. I've seen that happen,
Yeah.
Even with some of our listings, right?
We have.
And sometimes we don't know that's happening because we're not going to the property every single day, right? And so getting your home prepped for sale, readjusting your expectations, taking the time to do those little small repairs that,
maybe you could got away with before in a different market, right? But now that there's more options, you want to take care of those things.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like just touching up some of the checklists, right, of things that maybe deferred maintenance, that if you take care of that stuff, your inspection report's going to look really clean.
A lot thinner.
Right? It's a lot thinner. It's not a 40-page report. It's a 5-page, right?
Yeah.
And now when the buyer comes in, that helps you stand out from the home down the street.
Because you take care of all the little minor things, right?
Exactly, right? So
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's just being more diligent right now because you are competing with other people. And if I'm the buyer going to look at your home, I'm doing all my comparisons. I'm comparing yours to the one down the street, and I'm looking at all the little things. And if I'm a good agent, I'm pointing out all the little things too, right? To my buyer. So I think we talked about a lot, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully this gives you guys a good snapshot of what's happening today.
Let's talk a little bit about the pricing strategy.
Yeah.
I don't think we kind of touched on that, Enrique. I think, because a lot of times, what I've noticed is that if you talk to sellers, they want to price it at the dollar amount where they want to be at.
Yeah.
Right? Can you kind of touch on that? Because I know you're going on listing appointments and you have to educate some of the sellers and, you coach some of our agents. And again, I know we boil it down to two things, which is one is going to be how we market the property, which I think we did a great job in touching on. And the second thing is our pricing strategy.
Yeah.
Right? How do you price a property so that you drive all the eyeballs to the site, drive all the eyeballs to the open house, and drive people to actually go look at that property?
Yeah.
Can you kind of touch on that?
I think that's important, right? I think what I'm looking at, because we do service, a big area, right?
Yeah.
We're in the South Bay and the East Bay. We even got some listings in the Central Valley, and every area is a little bit different,
Okay.
right? And so I think it's important as an agent, who's going to list the property, is we study what's happening in that particular area.
Yes.
Because in some areas, it's better to price low
Yeah.
and let the market drive it up.
Okay.
In some other areas where homes sit on the market a lot longer, oftentimes people are offering less than asking price,
Got it.
right? It's because it's just the nature of the market. So sometimes you might want to price at market value or even
Good.
slightly higher because
You got to anticipate.
Yeah, you already know it's not selling in a week,
Yeah.
right? The average days on market is 45 days.
Got it.
And someone's probably going to offer a little bit less anyways, right?
Got it. Okay.
And
Good.
so in those type of situations, it's really market specific.
No,
right?
and I love that you said that because I think, again, what's out on the news, one, it's kind of really broad.
Yeah.
Right. Two, it's a little delayed. Right. And so I like that you kind of mentioned that, where it's like, if you're an agent, it's not one strategy fits all.
Yeah,
It's really
it's not.
Understand that market, maybe that zip code and that neighborhood to see how it's sitting, and that'll give you an idea on how to go into structure your pricing strategy.
Yeah, and the other things that come into play is also what type of property you have, and is there a lot of data that supports the price, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a community where not very many homes sell, right? Because
Okay.
there are still some communities, some of maybe your more luxury communities where
Yeah.
like only one sale happens a year or something, right?
Yeah.
Whereas right there, you have a little more room to kind of dictate where you start at, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're in like a median level community where there's a lot of, turnover happening, you have a lot of comps, right?
Yeah, you have something to compare it to.
Something
yeah.
to compare it to, right? So I think that comes into play.
Yeah.
If your property is really luxury and it's a unique or a custom home,
There you go.
Sometimes, you're setting kind of your own price because that property is different from every single property,
Good.
right?
Yeah, I like that.
We also sometimes recommend getting an appraisal on the property.
Okay.
So when we're having a hard time comping it, it's good to get an appraisal, because that appraisal report can now be used as leverage when you're negotiating or when
Got
you're
it.
justifying a price.
Okay.
And so that's going to
good. I
be
like
for maybe some of the larger properties or some of the properties where there's not a lot of data,
Yeah.
or custom types of properties, or maybe properties that have acreage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is we want to say,
More of
hey,
a unique type
it's a
property.
unique type
Yeah.
property. We'll have an appraisal to back us up,
Yeah.
right? The other thing too, there's a lot
Yeah.
you can go into. Sometimes if the property has an ADU,
There
that
you go.
also
that offsets everything.
it's a whole nother,
Because even though it has a square footage, but it's a separate unit.
it's a separate
There you
unit,
go.
right? And there's a lot of misconceptions around ADUs where people think like, okay, if I have a 1,500 square foot home and a 500 ADU that's separate,
Yeah.
well, now I can comp it at 2,000 square feet.
No, yeah.
You can't do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we even have appraisers that we consult with, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no,
You got to
have
compare it to other ADUs.
other
right?
homes that have a separate ADU,
Yeah.
right?
You just
Now-
can't add the square footage.
Now, if
$7
that
dollar.
ADU was all connected and it was just one kind of unit, right?
Yeah.
Then the whole one living space is
Then it's
2,000
2,000.
square feet, right?
That's
that's
a good point.
So even stuff like that, there's a lot of nuances, and
Yeah.
that's why when you are going to list your home for sale, you need to make sure you get an agent that's been around the block and has those resources too. Because sometimes us as agents, like, sometimes we don't know.
Yeah,
right?
no. I mean, because again, the average agent is not selling tons and tons of homes, right? So they may come across some of these unique situations, which I love about our team is if they do come across that, they can consult with our team, right? On our Tuesday meeting, they can bring that up. Hey, I got this unit, or I got this property with an ADU. How would we comp this out? Or I got this property with some acreage. How would we go about doing it?
Yeah.
And we can advise at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So there's a lot that goes into pricing strategy. It's really going to be property dependent, right?
Yeah.
And that's why setting a consultation with a qualified agent
Yeah,
is going to be
absolutely.
best, because it is different. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah,
right?
that's good. I'm happy we touched on that.
Good stuff. Well, I think we covered a lot, guys. I think you guys got a good snapshot of where the market's at. Hope this, is valuable to you when you're making your decisions going forward. And if you need any help or any advice, feel free to reach out to us, and we can definitely
definitely share this. I mean, share it with any family, friends that may be interested in buying or selling.
Yeah.
Maybe this can help them move along as well.
Yeah, and if you ever have a question, I think that's the biggest thing too. Some people are scared to ask questions because they think like, oh, that means I gotta, do something, or I gotta transact right now. It's like,
no. We've been doing this for a while,
so long, right? Like,
I mean, we like talking about this. We like giving information.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, and I'm happy you kind of touched on that, because for me, like we've been doing this. We're very fortunate, very blessed to have been doing this for so long, where we have tons of knowledge, and sometimes we don't even know how much knowledge we have on this, but we like to share it, right? Obviously we share it with our team, our clients, but again, it's no cost, no obligation. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll definitely share whatever we know.
Yeah.
Or if we don't know something, we'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah. Or if you need a resource or anything, we have tons of vendors that we work with that are vetted. We can definitely point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.